There's no time.
The time is
13
o'clock.
All right, here we are. We're back again, and it's time for another episode of 13 o'clock. This is episode 144.
Yeah. God damn, I can't believe we got that many episodes done. This one's Gilles de Rais.
Yes.
Kind of like a French Countess Bathory, but it's a man.
Well, as far as we know.
As far as we know.
Yeah, this is another interesting case. This is very much like the Elizabeth Bathory case in the sense that it's kind of a thing where he has this reputation. I don't think he's as well known as Countess Bathory, but it's a similar kind of thing where he's supposedly like this big serial killer that kills all these people, and he's a noble, and you know, later on there's some question about how many people he killed and all this.
Yeah, they were saying that he like decapitated thousands of children and put their heads on spikes and had the guests look at them and tell them which and decide which one's the prettiest and all that kind of stuff. You know. But I didn't know anything about this case, and I didn't really research it. Jenny did all the work on this, and I just asked a few questions while we were out on our walk, and I've come to a conclusion about it. But we'll talk about the case first. We're not gonna spoil it for people who don't know the case. But,
I actually ended up first.
It's an interesting case.
It is, yeah. Like, I first heard about this guy. I was reading a short story, and I think one of the characters in the short story had a book about him, and they were talking about, like, all the tortures and murder and stuff like that, and I'm like, who is that? So I looked it up, because I was just a little kid at the time. But I feel like I said, he's very similar kind of figure to Elizabeth Bathory, or even a little bit like Vlad the Impaler. But I feel like he's not as well known. Yeah. Although it should be said, and I'm not sure how accurate this is, but there are some sources that say that Gilles de Rais was actually the inspiration for the story of Bluebeard, at least in some of its iterations.
Yeah, now this guy didn't really have... His gimmick was a little bit differently, you know. It was a little bit different. I mean, Vlad the Impaler, you knew what you were dealing with when you were dealing with Vlad. I mean, he was bad. He was a bad dude, you know. He was a warrior.
Yeah.
And then, I guess you could say Bathory, her in her local area, you know, people considered her to be kind of spooky, you know, thought maybe she had something to do with all these missing kids.
Ooh, witchy woman.
Exactly. But this guy, Gilles de Rais, kind of had a different vibe to him, you know. He was one of these fabulous motherfuckers. You know what I'm talking about? You know,
but also a military badass also, and then later a fabulous.
He dressed well, had a lot of money, handled, you know, was real popular with the peasants, you know what I mean? And everybody liked him. So he had a different image.
Yeah.
But, you know, until these allegations came up.
Yeah.
But, you know, we'll get into it.
Yeah, like I said, it's a really interesting story.
Yeah,
I'm pretty
he was
sure
rich. This dude was rich.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that somebody actually recommended this. I think I would have got around to it eventually because I've always thought he was kind of a fascinating guy, but I think somebody recommended it. So we're finally getting around to it. So before we do that, let me just give one little shout out. We got a very generous PayPal donation from someone named Robina.
She sent us $50, man.
So thank you very much. That is always so awesome when I open my email in the morning and see that.
Yeah, if you can't get us on PayPal, don't worry. You can send it to us directly through. If you can't get us on Patreon, you can get us through PayPal.
Yeah.
You know, you got a link to our to your
it's
PayPal.
It's on the blog, and there's one, and it's in the show notes always too.
Yeah, you know, some people, you know, that, you know, life is life. Some people can't agree to like pay you a certain amount a month. Maybe they don't know what's going to be happening that month. And
and I totally get that.
That happens with us. But if you ever want to just, you know, drop us a $5, or drop us a 10, or Madame, this one, she drops us a 50. That's a huge one.
Yeah.
That's happened several times. We kind of, I guess we've given shout outs to people who did that.
Yeah, I try to always do that. Like,
I don't think we ever mentioned the amount, but you know what I mean.
On the next show that we record, I always try to like
But we get a lot of 20s and stuff, but shit, 50. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's super awesome. And like I said, anybody that can, if you can give us anything, that's cool. If you can't, that's cool.
Right.
Like I said, sometimes, especially since I freelance and stuff, so sometimes I don't know how much money I'm gonna have at the end of the month either.
Right.
Pretty much, I can only give. I give actually to the Welcome to the Basement show on YouTube, where they talk about movies and stuff. I give them $5, but that's pretty much all I can. Yeah, that's all I can safely. I've thought about giving to other ones, and I'm just like, well, I don't know if I'm going to run out of money this month, so I better not.
And what's funny with Patreon, it used to be that Patreon, if you gave $1 a month, Patreon got almost all of it. I don't know if it was still like that at the time. You know what I mean? Like the creator ended up keeping 25 cents.
Yeah, they've restructured some a little bit.
They probably changed it. But we're at the point now, you know what I mean? If you guys just want to give us a $2 a month or something, man, go for it. I don't know if we have that selection on the Patreon.
You can actually put in whatever you want.
Enter whatever you want, and it's at the point now. If you guys can help us reach 1,000 a month, that'd be great.
And like I said, what I tried to do, it's like everybody that gives $20 and up a month, I send little care packages out of various things every quarter. Mm-hmm. But another thing I started doing is that even if you give less than $20 a month, then I still do a quarterly drawing. Right. So you might still get some stuff.
Yeah. I think anybody who is on Patreon, doesn't matter how much they give us, they all get to see the show early, right?
Yeah, I do early access for all the patrons.
So that's what you'll get for $2 a month, early access.
Yeah, and like I said, I've been trying. I wanted to kind of put up other little videos on Patreon, free outtakes and stuff. But that's the thing, though, we don't really do it because I don't hardly take anything.
Right, we're so busy, especially with the movie reviews and everything else that we got going on, and her writing the books, the audio books, and all this other shit. The freelancing, the magazine articles that she's writing, you just don't really have a whole lot of time for this.
Yeah.
To do extra video stuff. Maybe try to throw in some of the cat, when I'm sober. When I'm sober, I'll grab my tablet and try to take a picture of Baby Cookie doing something.
Yeah, because she's always doing something.
Of course, I like to talk shit. I'm always sober pretty much except when the show is going.
Yeah, that's true. This is kind of mostly this is the only time we drink.
The audience loves it when I start getting kind of loaded and start.
Well, yeah, because
telling Mississippi stories.
Well, because as the show goes on, and you get drunker and drunker, you tend to get louder and shoutier and and you're going off on all this. You're repeating yourself and going off on all these different tangents.
Yeah, I've seen some of the shows and I'm going man, I don't know how I held it together okay, but I can see it. I can see that I'm fucked up.
Yeah. That's all right, though. It's all
tequila,
good.
Man.
Yeah, it'll do that. It'll do that.
She drinks, too, during the show. You drinking vodka.
Yeah. But see, I mostly have to talk and read my notes, so I can't drink. So I can't just sit there drinking.
Right. She drinks it after the show's over.
Yeah, I usually drink it after the show's over when I start editing it. All right, so I think that was pretty much the only shout-out. So let's start talking about Gilles de Rais.
Yeah.
And we'll just kind of go through his biography before we get to the...
Yeah, this guy's pretty well documented. I mean, he's not as shadowy as, say, Bathory.
Yeah.
Or fucking Vlad. Because, the documentation from that era, from that time and place is kind of spotty. But this is France we're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, this was the same era. This was early 1400s.
Yeah, but France,
They I feel
that was the center of civilization.
Record keeping together.
Wallachia and all those other places out in the Eastern Europe, that was the damn Badlands back in this time. You know what I mean? They were barely civilized. Barbarians.
Flinging poo at one another.
So it made a badass, though. It was Mad Max land.
Yeah, I guess it was. All right. So, Gilles de Rais. They think he was born in 1405. His dad's name was Guy Laval. And his mother's name was Marie de Crayon. Now, his parents died. He also had a younger brother. His parents died when he was pretty young. I think he was only 8 or 9 years old. I think his dad died in some kind of horrible, gruesome hunting accident, which some sources say that Gilles de Rais saw happen. His mom died of some undisclosed illness. So after that, him and his brother went to live with their maternal grandfather, whose name was Jean de Crayon. And he was, they don't know, I don't think they know like a huge amount about him, but he was kind of strict and all this other stuff. Now, Gilles de Rais, he seems like he had a fairly normal childhood. He seemed like a real intelligent kid. He was actually really kind of precocious. Like he learned Latin and Greek and stuff like that when he was very young. He drew like illuminated manuscripts and all this other kind of stuff. And he seemed to like value education, intellectual pursuits, that type of stuff. Now, one thing that his grandfather did, which was maybe not as weird at the time, but it's pretty creepy nowadays. It's like pretty much as soon as he got the kid in his clutches, he's starting to like wanting to marry him off to somebody. You know what I mean? For strategic monetary purposes.
Well, that was the culture of the time. That's what they did.
Yeah. Now, even though that was the culture of the time, he started real early. I mean, Gilles de Rais was 12 years old. The first girl that he tried to hook Gilles de Rais up with was 4.
Yeah.
Her name was Jean Paynel. She was an heiress in Normandy.
Well, her dad must have been somebody.
Well, that's what I mean. They were trying to make like a strategic marriage.
Whose dad this is.
Yeah.
They were trying to join two economic empires.
Yeah, that's exactly what was going on.
Right.
So it just seemed weird that but he was 12 and she was 4. So he was trying to facilitate that.
I think he could seal some contracts.
Yeah.
Get some deals done.
Exactly.
In the meantime.
So that actually didn't work out. The next one that he tried to do was he was trying to marry him off to a woman or a girl named Beatrice de Rohan, and she was actually the Duke of Brittany's niece. And that didn't work out either. But then finally, in 1420, so I guess Gilles de Rais was only about 15 years old.
Duke of Brittany, that's prime real estate.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. So of course we're talking about the upper crust.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, this is.
That's what I mean. These are all noble families.
Right. Yeah.
These aren't just like
these are like in line for the throne.
Yeah, they aren't like little peasants or anything like that. So in 1420, which I assume, so Gilles de Rais would have been about 15 years old, he was finally married off to someone, and he ended up being married to a woman named Catherine de Thouars. She was also of Brittany, and she was also an heiress. Now, when these two married, they became, she was heir to one of the largest empires in France. So, or largest estates. So when her and Gilles de Rais married, they became one of the richest couples in France. They had like either as nice or nicer shit than the king had. So they were very, very powerful, and they had shit tons of money. Now, in his early years, like in his late teens, early 20s, Gilles de Rais had a very distinguished military career. At the time, obviously, the 100 Years' War was going on between France and England. So life was not fun at the time. It was pretty much, I was watching this one thing, and you don't really think about it because, the 100 Years' War, even though they call it that, it actually went on for 116 years. But they're like, so entire generations of people grew up in this, this environment of never knowing a time when they weren't at war. Yeah. They're like, so there was pretty much those battles, murders, kidnappings. It was just constant. It was going on all the time, and several generations of people grew up in that environment.
But I must say, during that period, it was not war as we know it.
No.
Okay, you're talking about more like glorified gang fights.
Yeah.
In colored outfits. They were losing and gaining territory, but that was, noble families getting access to other people's lands.
Yeah.
So they could grow on it, You're not talking about war as we know it. We're not talking about global conflict, It's,
well, yeah, obviously it was the 1400s. They didn't have nukes or anything like that.
Right.
Planes or anything.
These are like I said, these are almost glorified gang fights, really.
Yeah.
If you were looking by today's standards. Maybe a couple thousand men on each side.
But it's still, you have to think too, this is the 1400s, so it's like everything is filthy and gross, and everyone's diseased. Yeah. And then on top of that, you also have like all these battles going on, and you're just constantly at war with another country. And it's
by today's standards, Europe was a shithole country.
Well, the thing about it is that that's one thing that I kind of find funny about people that complain about how shitty the world is now and stuff like that, I'm like, what, do you want to go back
What the
there?
fuck are you talking about?
No.
Right, yeah.
It's like, I know it sucks in like maybe other parts of the world, but
Yeah.
in the West, like in the US and Europe and stuff, it's like shit. We have toilets and running
Yeah.
water and food, and
Yeah.
it's like, what are you complaining
We
about?
are the shit. You should have seen how it was.
That's what I mean.
Right.
We live better than like super wealthy people
Yeah.
lived back then.
Yeah.
Like they were still pooping in a bucket and throwing it out the window.
Just throwing it out the window. And medieval cities were just
Now
running.
we just do that if, we feel like it. Just kidding.
Medieval cities were just full of open sewage.
That's what I mean. There was
just
festering.
terrible. I mean, you can read things in history where they couldn't clean the streets. The streets were so filthy they just said fuck it, and they just built a new
they
wooden
just
street
gave
over the
up.
top of it. And if you were on the first floor, you're now in an underground world filled with shit. It was just, it was
because
nasty.
I mean, just from a logistical point of view, I mean, think about however many people lived in a major city, like say London or Paris or whatever. Every single one of those people has to take a dump at least once a day.
Yeah, and then the horses.
And the horses and
Right.
other animals and stuff.
Right.
They had other, like
Yeah.
farm animals and shit.
And the rats, rat infested.
Yeah.
There were wild cats running around eating on the rats, and fleas eating on the rats, and then little things on the fleas. It was nasty. You wouldn't have liked it.
You wouldn't have liked
You wouldn't have liked it. And then here's another thing. It drives me crazy that modern people try to project modern morality on those people. Those people were fucking savages
Well,
compared to us.
understandably so.
Yeah.
I mean, look how they lived.
Yeah.
It's not like they knew any different.
Right.
But yeah, so
they weren't like us. There have been whole books written about it. Their sense of humor was totally different. They were a very cruel and stupid people. I mean, their idea of a good time was to tie a bunch of cats together and throw those cats into a fire. Literally.
Yeah, they didn't
They're
really
dumb.
have any concept of
No.
like an animal could feel pain or
Even humans.
even humans.
They didn't
I don't
have.
really think
they
they
didn't
gave
have.
much of a crap
yeah,
about
it was rare to
Not
find.
the same way that we do.
No, it was rare to find people that had compassion. That didn't really exist.
But like I
mean,
said,
we're not really talking about the Dark Ages right now. We're talking about the Renaissance. But even in the Renaissance, they were not fully developed humans as you would know them today. They just didn't have the early childhood development, maybe the nutrition, and it may have been genes too.
Well, I mean, like I said, look how they grew up. It's like everything was disease, and it's
Yeah.
like they
didn't live long.
they didn't have very good nutrition. Particularly, I mean, even the nobles, they lived longer and probably healthier, but not like nowadays.
Yeah.
They didn't have modern medicine. They didn't have decent food. Everything was probably crawling with bacteria.
And they still would have been kind of dirty and stinky by today's standards.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So, I would
I
be
mean,
very...
they lived in palaces and they pissed behind the tapestries.
That's what I mean. I would be very
Yeah.
surprised if anybody
There'd be dog shit on the floor and stuff.
if anybody could
palaces.
kind of transcend
Yeah, no.
that environment and like kind of be
Right.
a decent enough person.
Right, so,
But yeah, so all right, so what was I doing? Okay, so his military career, blah blah blah. Now, when Gilles de Rais was 16, there was actually this kind of battle between there was these two factions. It was one was like the Duke of Brittany, and then someone else was fighting with them. And Duke John VI, who was part of the Duchy of Brittany, he was kidnapped by the other side. Now, because Gilles de Rais was fighting on their side, he actually got that dude released. Like, I don't know if he went in there and like kicked ass or if he just like negotiated or whatever. So he actually got the Duke released, and the Duke was so grateful that he gave Gilles de Rais like a whole shit ton of land and property and all this other stuff. So which increased, him and his wife's wealth, much, much larger. So, so then about 5 years later, he goes to, and he becomes like part of the court of Charles VII. And, he gets all in the courtly manners and all that other kind of stuff. Then he went on to be a commander in the Royal Army. He got like all kinds of medals and awards for bravery and all this stuff. Now, very famously, and this is probably where most people know, I mean, other than the serial killer stuff, this is probably where most people know of him, was that in 1429, he hooked up with Joan of Arc. Now, Joan of Arc, obviously, she was the 17-year-old peasant girl that turned up at the court of Charles VII.
We gotta do something about her, because that's some fish. That's a fishy story. But I want to look more into that. Joan of Arc.
And says, I had a vision of the Archangel Michael, the Orleans was surrounded by the English, and it looked like the French army was going to lose, but she kind of came in and she said, no, God is on my side. I have all these magical powers. I'm invincible. Give me an army and I will defeat them. And for whatever reason, accounts differ. Like, they're not really sure why the king... Some accounts say that the king was actually, like, terrified of her because she apparently came in and could, like, wound herself and, like, heal herself, or at least make it look like she could heal herself. So there was some shit like that going on. But, in whatever case...
There's so many weird stories about that girl, I've kind of wondered whether or not maybe she was a fictional character. It almost seems like that might have been a story that was made up after the fact. I want to look more into it later, though.
Well, I can't really, say to that because I didn't know.
I haven't looked that much into it, but it's just those stories kind of sound like religious stories about people that have, there's a lot of religions in the world that make up stories about people that have never existed. And there's something about Joan of Arc that some of that story just sounds awful fishy. That sounds an awful lot like a religious fable.
Well, like I said, I don't know. I mean, as far as I know, she really did exist. I don't know, like, all the stories that are told about her. I don't know how much of that is true.
Well, I was kind of raised to believe that Jesus existed, but I kind of doubt whether or not that guy exists in the form that we're given. Those stories all came from other religions.
Yeah, I know.
So if there was a Jesus, he no longer survives in the stories that we're given. And then if Jesus isn't this guy out of these stories, then what made him special? You know what I mean? Why would he be remembered? Well, could it be that it's just stories based around an old wise man that came back from the grave? You know what I mean? So maybe there was no Jesus. I don't really think there was one.
Yeah,
but could be that. Well, I'm getting sidetracked on Joan of Arc, but I'm kind of skeptical about Joan of Arc. I got to hear more about that story. But go ahead.
All right, so. Like I said, so Joan of Arc, comes forward and says, like, give me an army and I will lead it and I will defeat the English. And Gilles de Rais was all about that. He's like, yeah, and he was like on her side. And he's like, yeah, she can do it. I'm going to help her out. So, so he basically becomes Joan of Arc's right-hand man. Now, they go into battle against the English, and very famously, it took them 9 days, but they actually did beat back the English army. And after that, just both Joan of Arc and Gilles de Rais became, kind of nationwide heroes because they had, gotten rid of the English incursion. So, they became very well loved. Now...
So according to Gilles de Rais, she existed.
Yeah.
And he left things
behind. He fought at her side in the Siege of Orleans.
Do any of his writings exist about her, do you think? I mean... Okay.
Well, there were other writings about both of them, and
so her existence was confirmed. As far as you know.
Yeah, as far as I know.
Okay.
I mean, I've never heard anybody argue
that she didn't really
exist. I just have a hard time believing
men of that time allowing a woman to have that kind of power, especially a young one. That was obviously crazy, if you ask me.
Well, I'm not sure if they saw her as crazy. I think they saw her as like a holy person.
Yeah.
I mean, the way she must have come across, in a very convincing manner, that she really had these visions, and she's like, the Archangel Michael showed me this vision and we're going to win.
Yeah.
And she must have been very good at convincing them that she had really seen that and that she would be able to do it.
It's just really odd.
It is very odd.
To allow a woman in those days
that's why
to don armor and to go into battle. I mean, they didn't even do that really in the 1700s.
Well, I mean, that's why people remember her, because it was so strange.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Now, like I said, some accounts that I've read said that the reason that Charles VII gave her an army was because he was scared to death of her. Because he really did think that she was some kind of like angel incarnate or something like that, and he was afraid of pissing God off, I guess.
It's also strange that a random crazy girl would have the strength to don armor from that era and to actually have the skills to go into battle and survive it.
Yeah.
Did she actually fight? Far as
I
you
don't
know?
know. She led the army. That's what they said. Her and Gilles de Rais led the army. And it took them 9 days, but they won.
We gotta look back. Gotta look into that a little more. You know, I know warfare wasn't quite as, you know, like, think of that. Warfare is a very complicated fucking thing when you're talking about a lot of logistics involved. There's chains of command involved. There's training involved. You know what I mean? You can't take a random person today and just put them in charge of an army.
Although you don't know what she was up to before she showed
would-
up at the court.
She would have had to have gotten some kind of training somewhere.
Well, yeah, maybe she did. Maybe her dad trained her. Maybe somebody she knew trained her. You know what I mean?
That just sounds awful.
And I mean, she was
suspicious to me.
17, and everybody says, "Oh, a 17-year-old girl," but like, you know,
Well, the average
where boys were out fighting at that age.
That didn't matter back then.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
That wouldn't have been seen as a kid back in those days.
Most of the infantrymen
She
and
would be
pikemen,
seen
you're
as
talking
an
about
adult.
15, 14,
Yeah,
15
she would have been seen as an adult.
Right.
Like I said, Gilles de Rais
Yes.
married when he was 15. It's
Yeah.
like, and nobody thought that was weird. So it's like they didn't have a concept of teenagers.
They didn't have a concept of children and teenagers even in the 1800s.
Yeah, not really.
As soon as you could talk, you're an adult. They put your ass in a suit, put you to work in a mine.
Yeah.
Can I have some more bread, sir?
Or on a farm, as the case may be.
Yeah.
As soon as you were old enough to walk around and like lift shit, they're like, all right, get to work.
Yeah.
That was why they had kids back
Yeah.
then. But yeah, so because of Gilles de Rais and Joan of Arc's triumph at the Siege of Orleans, he was actually made Marshal of France. So like I said, he got all kind of accolades, got all kind of like medals and all kind of shit. So after that, he gets, he gets his own little, his little royal arms and all this other shit. Now, later on, what happened 2 years after the Siege of Orleans ended, very famously, Joan of Arc was burned at the stake. Now, why that happened, they think, was because the French people that burned her were actually like Burgundians, I guess who were actually spying for the English, so they were kind of traitors, like on the opposite side. And they thought that they didn't like that she had like whipped the English's ass, and so they took her prisoner and burned her at the stake in May of 1431. Now, by all accounts, Gilles de Rais was not there when she was burned at the stake, but after she died, he seems to have, nobody said, like, I'm sure he was bummed out about it because I think they were friends, but he kind of like became disillusioned and he didn't really want to be in the military anymore. And at this point, he had so much money. I mean, he was I think he was only in his 20s at this point. He was 24, 25, something like that. He had so much money that he didn't really have to do anything. He could just like kind of fiddle fart around and he'd just have enough money to do whatever he wanted. But in the way, the reason that he had so much money, that was what ended up getting him into trouble. So his grandfather, the one who had tried to set him up, got him married off to all these girls, he died in 1432. Now, after the grandfather died, apparently Gilles de Rais really kind of went off on a spending spree. He was like buying all these castles and properties and stuff, which that wasn't that big a deal because it was still, it's still real estate. That's fine. But
yeah, money doesn't vanish when you buy things like that.
But even then, like, his family were like, whoa, bro, kind of tone it down a little bit, because he was apparently just, like, spending money all over the place.
It's not like they had a banking system that you could probably trust, though.
Yeah, but...
Better to just invest it. He was probably doing the right thing for the day. Yeah, we'll see.
You see, you're making it go all blurry again.
Don't worry about that.
You just keep moving around and it's going all blurry.
Doesn't matter.
Now, he must have started this reckless spending before his grandfather died, because after his grandfather died, he ended up this really fancy like sword and breastplate and stuff that he had, which should have gone to the older heir, which would have been Gilles de Rais. The grandfather left it to Gilles de Rais's younger brother instead, like almost as a kind of like, fuck you, like, hey, stop spending so much money type of thing. The younger brother's name was René de la Suze, by the way. So, like I said, the property was, people were like, okay, well, you're spending kind of a lot of money and shit, but okay, whatever, it's real estate. But then Gilles de Rais decided he was going to indulge some other hobbies that he had. Now, very famously, what he started spending his money on was he started staging these huge, elaborate theatrical productions that were like reenactments of his battles that he had been in, like in the 100 Years' War, including the Siege of Orleans and a bunch of other ones.
That makes sense, though. You know why? Because Roman emperors did that kind of stuff when they had
It was on that level, pretty much.
Yeah, they would reenact entire battles, even naval battles in the middle of coliseums. They'd pay for it. And if it's about your greatness of what you did in your army, back in your battle, it would be the equivalent of making a movie about yourself.
Yeah, that's essentially what he was doing.
That's what he's doing. Right. But you know what? That would be smart. Because if you're making movies about yourself and making movies about your greatness, what does that do in the eyes of the public? That makes the people believe you to be a great man.
Yeah, except that's not how this worked out.
Yeah. But I guess that's what he's trying.
Alert.
That's what he's trying. That's what he's trying to do, though.
Yeah, but like I said, that's not how that worked out.
Well, that might end up getting your ass in trouble.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so his most famous play that they know about was actually called The Mystery of the Siege of Orleans. It was comprised of 20,000 lines of verse, had about 500 extras, and 140 speaking parts. Like the extras were all the soldiers and stuff.
Yeah.
So they built these big elaborate sets. He commissioned 600 custom-made costumes, which were only used once, like for one production of it, and then they would be destroyed, and then they would make them all over again for the next production. Another thing that he would do was that he would offer as much free food and drink as he wanted for anybody that came to the production. So, of course, everyone was going to come because they're like...
Free food.
You could have as much booze. It was like an all-you-can-eat buffet.
But
like
you had to fight that line, though. You had to fight the line.
I'm sure it was like a fucking
So, this wasn't taking place in a theater. This was going to be open air, like virtual reality.
You walked
around on this battlefield and watched these armies fight.
Yeah.
That's probably what they're talking about.
That's crazy.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, it's like, so all these
That's a good idea.
Fucking spectators were there, like, just drinking all the food they could eat.
Probably
stealing some
what
of
they're
it, taking it
talking
home.
about, this is early multimedia technology.
Yeah.
This is a movie and a theme park all happening at once. It's like going to Disney. But it's free.
Yeah.
And you get to see this live action reenactment of these battles and hear about what a badass fucking, Gilles de Rais is.
Yeah.
And this is all on his bill. I can understand it.
But it should be noted that
he must have had a huge ego.
Yeah, yeah. It should be noted that when he first started doing this, he was already almost bankrupt. You know what I mean? So he was just like throwing money away and his family was like freaking out. Another thing that he did was he wanted to construct his own chapel on one of his castles, maybe his favorite castle. I don't know. That's really funny to me that somebody has a favorite castle, but he did. So he built one called the Chapel of the Holy Innocents. Now he wanted to get a priest for it, but apparently he couldn't get a priest to come there, or his family was like, "Man, don't encourage him. Like, don't go give mass or whatever at his fucking."
He wanted his own private priest to handle his shit.
Yeah. So what Gilles de Rais did instead was he commissioned like priest robes for himself.
Yeah.
And then he gave the sermons himself. Like, and I don't know if other people showed up or if he was just in there like in an empty room or something.
Well, that's cool.
It was probably like all for his staff and stuff, I would imagine.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this guy, he was
that'd be very sacrilegious in the day.
Well, that's what people were complaining about.
But he's probably like, well, shit, I could read that. You know what I mean?
All I need is a fancy dress, and I can just stand up there.
Same shit.
Yeah.
I know what he's doing.
That's probably exactly what he did. Well, and like I said, they did actually think it was really blasphemous. That's why that was another thing that people were freaking out about. Not only
he was a LARPer. This is live action role play.
Yes, that's exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it was. Except he had more money than sense, I guess.
Uh-huh. Yeah, he should have thought that. If you ask me, I think he's cruising for a bruise.
Yeah.
Just by spending all this money.
Yeah, and like
promoting yourself, and then building your old churches, and then saying, "Fuck it, I'm gonna be my own priest."
I'm my own priest too. I'm
gonna be my own pope. He gets pope robes made.
I want a pope robe.
Yeah. You want a Pope robe? You want to be the Pope?
Pope robe and a big hat.
Okay. That's lame shit.
Nah, that's pimping, man.
No.
That's pimping.
I don't need that.
But yeah, so like I said, even when he first started doing this shit, like in 1432 or whenever it was, he was already like rapidly heading toward broke, and he had already started selling off some of his properties in order to finance this huge play that he was
Disneyland,
doing.
yeah.
This is like Michael Jackson was
Yeah.
Neverland Ranch or
right.
whatever. It's kind of like that in his priest robes and all this other kind of shit.
I can't believe that shit.
What?
It's a grown-ass man in his fucking 20s buying Neverland Ranch Ferris wheels and fucking trains and shit like that in his mansion, and he's going to have nothing but little kids, little boys come over. And he says, well, it's about the children. And then you look at the photographs of all the little children, you say, well, where the fuck are the girls? They're just boys.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, because you know, dude in his 20s had that kind of power and that kind of fame. It would just look like a damn strip club, and that it had like a palace and a strip club. My train would have strippers on it. My train would have titties on it if I was in my 20s and you had that much money and power back then.
All I just thought of was fucking Thomas the Tank Engine, except a girl train with titties on them.
Yeah, something like that, you know.
Instead of a cow catcher.
That shit would have been tacky as fuck. It'd have been tacky as fuck. I
Can
would have had
also-
a big ass mansion and
Can the boobs also have pasties with
Yeah,
glitter?
yeah.
Okay.
I would have a mansion and every room would have been a fucking nightclub. Just a different nightclub in every room.
I could get behind that.
That's what it would be like.
You wouldn't stage elaborate plays with like super elaborate
No.
costumes of all your battles and stuff.
No.
You can understand why
I
he did
saw
that,
Neverland Ranch. They did a tour of it. It was actually quite cool. It was very 80s looking, or 90s looking, if you asked me.
Yeah.
The woodwork, but it was nice.
Yeah.
But outside was like an amusement park and had a train
I've seen
depot and shit like that. And I'm like going, that's pretty cool, but you know, you're a grown ass man. What the fuck do you need to? Why do you need to entertain all these little boys with a fucking train?
Yeah.
It's kind of weird.
I wouldn't
you know?
mind like a cool roller coaster like Space Mountain or something.
Right, but you know,
that might be neat.
I don't know, man.
Or a haunted mansion. Like a haunted mansion ride. I could be all about that. But I don't want shit for little kids.
That's all it was.
I don't like little kids. I don't want them hanging around
Yeah.
my house.
Like, get out of here.
They're no fun.
Right.
All right. So he had been spending all this ridiculous amount of money. His family was flipping the fuck out. You know, saying it's like he's going to spend the whole estate. There's not going to be anything left. So in 1435, a bunch of his family members get together and they go right to the Pope, who at the time was Pope Eugene IV. And the first thing they asked him to do, they said, can you, like, you know, his Chapel of the Holy Innocents that he built, he's like, can you, like, say that's not a real thing? So we can, like, get him to not, like, tear it down or something like that. And the Pope wouldn't do it. So then the family said, okay, well, fuck you. We're going to the king instead. Now, the king, I guess he couldn't really, like, decommission a church or whatever. I'm not really sure how that works. But the king did say, okay, well, I will make this like royal edict that says in this area that we are going to like proclaim that Gilles de Rais is like, he spends too much money and he's not allowed to sell any more of his property. And they also made it so that the subjects of Charles VII, if you were a subject of Charles VII, you couldn't enter into a contract with Gilles de Rais.
So they blocked him.
Yeah.
They blocked his PayPal account.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
But yeah, they basically made it
And
so
his
that,
ATM card.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they put a lock like on his money. Just like,
Yeah.
you knock it off, okay? It's like, we can't have any more of this.
For life.
Yeah.
For life. He's in his 20s.
And yeah, like I said, he was in his mid-20s at this point. They also said that even if the castles that he had sold, they said, okay, well, the person that's living in them now, like, you can't sell them. Like, you have to stay there. So this was, like, affected a lot of people.
Yeah.
So he must have been spending a shit ton of money for everybody to get involved like this. Like,
I have a hard time wondering.
Cut it
I have a
out.
hard time wondering. It's weird. Why did they care?
They
were threatened by all this spending money and buying shit, evidently.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I kind
he
of
must
feel
have had
like
a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, like I said,
Maybe
him
they
and his
thought
wife were one of the richest
I mean,
couples in France, like right up there with the
the
king.
only modern analogy I can think is back in the day you had Howard Hughes. Howard Hughes owned so much stuff and had so much money. They had whole FBI divisions and Treasury divisions trying to figure out how much he actually owned. Because, you know what I mean? He had it veiled in a certain way where companies owned companies, and then there were firewalls and other companies. And they were just paranoid that Howard Hughes could possibly do something crazy like collapse the stock market.
Yeah.
And he was mentally unstable. Hughes. That's
a good analogy.
So maybe
with this
that's what they were thinking.
Kind of situation.
Is that you got this young guy with all this fucking money, you know, he's got this imagination, and he's too young to really control himself. He might buy and sell the wrong things in the wrong order and somehow collapse France's treasury or cause some kind of a economic bottleneck somewhere. Something. You know,
and I think his family members too. I mean, probably had some kind of. I mean, because families were very closely, particularly noble families,
they were trying to protect their own money.
They were trying to protect their own financial interests, sure. So it's like they don't want him spending this entire estate because maybe they'll get a chunk of it. Fortune. Right. You know what I mean? So maybe they'll get a chunk of it someday, and they don't want that shit to happen.
Could have been that too.
And
could have been that powerful members of his family went in there and said, "We got to help us, man, because he's going to fuck up the family fortune, and that's 100 of us, and we're a big part of the economy."
Yeah, I think that's probably exactly what it was. And like I said, obviously I didn't live in the 1400s. I didn't know the dude personally, but there might have been kind of an aspect of, we're going to do an intervention because maybe they really did think he was losing his marbles.
Maybe, yeah.
Because he really was, I mean, like I said, buying castles for that, type of person is not that crazy, but apparently he bought like a whole shit ton of them, and then he was just throwing money at these like big lavish productions. He's feeding all these peasants and stuff and giving them free booze and food at every single place.
That makes sense.
So maybe they thought he was
losing his mind. He's
going crazy, and he was putting all their money
in jeopardy. So
right. So they thought they needed to intervene.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
King asked the king to step in. Keep this young boy in check, you know what I mean?
Right. Because it might have been the kind of case where, you know what I mean? How like some, rube out in a fucking trailer in fucking Oklahoma somewhere and they win the lottery.
Yeah.
And then they just start buying, and then like 5 years later, all their money is gone and they're just like a meth addict. With fucking, I think
guy wins $20 million. And
right.
4 years later, he doesn't have a pot to piss in.
Right.
How the hell did you spend 28
just because he bought the things.
Yeah, bought all the things and then gave all the things away and financed all the things and couldn't pay for it, and it all vanished.
I mean, I can understand how that happens because when you're poor...
don't have to manage money.
Well, because you don't have any concept of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't... to me, like $20 million... Even though intellectually I know that that's a finite amount and it will eventually run out, I don't think some people have that concept. You know what I mean? Because if you're poor and you're just like living paycheck to paycheck and it's like, oh, I make $250 a week. I mean, if you get $20 million, it might seem like that shit is never going to run out. You just keep spending and spending and spending, and then you're like, oh, all of a sudden it's all gone.
I don't look at it that way. I was raised to be pretty good with money in a certain way, so... You buy things that make money.
I mean, I can understand how it happens, though.
Yeah, I can understand how it happens.
I don't think I would do that.
No.
Because I'm just a very frugal person, and there's a lot of shit I don't need that I wouldn't buy.
Give me $20 million, and I'm going to buy a really nice, smaller mansion. Invested in something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
A little fleet of vehicles. And then I could sit on the rest of that. I could probably live off of fucking finance. I could live off of, what do you call it?
Interest.
The interest off the rest of that, yeah.
That's what I mean, because it seems like a lot of things that people want to buy, like if they're like, oh, in a lottery, I'll buy this, that, and the other thing. A lot of that shit I don't want. I don't want a private plane. I don't want a boat. It's like I wouldn't mind having like a decent sized house, but then I'd have to pay somebody to clean it because I'm not going to fucking do it.
Yeah, but that doesn't cost anything when you have that kind of money.
True. But other than that, I can't really think of a lot of shit I want. Yeah. We were talking about it the other day. I said... Even if we had like a nice little mansion, I said, you know what the only cool thing I would want in there? I wouldn't mind a pool. That'd be nice. Yeah, but
I hate those things.
Well, like I said, if someone else was taking care of it, then that would be cool. I would like to have a little movie theater.
Yeah.
But that's about the only extravagance that I could come up with. The other stuff I don't really care about. I don't really want anything like that.
I wouldn't want a pool. Maybe a jacuzzi, but not a pool.
Yeah, okay. We can compromise on that whenever we win the lottery.
Yeah.
That's never gonna.
I
never play the lottery, so I'm never gonna win. But
Work hard, and you can make that kind of money.
Yeah, one of these days.
It's coming.
All right, so
keep writing books.
Yeah, I know I am.
Yeah.
I worked on it all day today. You know.
Every time you make books, you make more money. And they just hang out there in cyberspace making money.
Yeah.
Just live the dream.
I'm trying.
Yeah.
It's just I'm at the stage now where it's just like.
Well, the technology didn't exist back in the day. Now you can do it.
Yeah, I know.
Now you can do it. So.
I really do appreciate the fucking, print on demand technology. The whole
Amazon.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all
because seriously,
audiobooks.
I always wanted to be a writer ever since I was little.
Yeah,
and the whole thing, like in the 70s and 80s, you basically
the gatekeepers.
You had to get an agent, then you had to send things to publishing houses and stuff like that, and it was just. And I got a couple novels published like by small presses, but it's such a pain, and you get so many rejections, and I couldn't do the cover art, which I hated because it was not a process of natural selection at all. It's a bunch of vampiric gatekeepers that you got to pass through. Each one of them wanted a cut. And publishing houses were fucking extremely greedy. But that's all gone now. Don't worry about it. Yeah. Well, like I said, I like...
If your books are good and you got a fan base, you make money. That's all.
I like that I have essentially final control over what I want the product to look like and be like. I have I have control over every single aspect of the production of it. I can design my own cover if I want. I can lay it out the way I want, and I can do whatever I want with it, which I like.
The only thing that's changed is that you can't hit the jackpot like it was back in the days. It's a lot harder. Like there's not going to be any more Stephen Kings.
Where he got like $400,000 advance for his first novel.
Right.
And before that, he'd only published short stories in like titty magazines.
Yeah, and they were, they're products of the publishing houses and the old system. That's all gone.
Except for J.K. Rowling.
Yeah.
I mean, there's still like novelists nowadays that make shit tons of money, but it's a very, very small percentage. There's some that, make workman-like money just like they would if they had a regular job.
Yeah.
But they have to write a lot. They have to write like all the time.
And that's the level you're at now.
Yeah, which, I don't mind doing that because I like doing that, but,
Yeah.
Yeah, so I feel like that might have been, and I'm not saying that I don't think that his family were vampires or that they were, obviously looking out for their own self-interest, but maybe there was something to the fact that maybe he was kind of wigging out and maybe he had too much money for being like 25 years old and he was just spending money like an idiot. And they thought they would get in there and do something about that before something bad happened.
The French noble scene, even all the way up to the 1700s and 1800s, they lived like rock stars. So if you had a lot of money, you were the shit, okay?
Yeah.
They lived the life. And he was partying, if you ask me. Partying, self-promoting, having fun, And so, it went to his head. I'm sure it went to his head.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. I'm sure it did. And like I said, he, it's aside from all that, like aside from him having like all this fucking money, he was also a military hero. So probably everywhere he went, everybody was like, "Woo, you're the greatest."
Well,
so
how that happens.
Right. You know how that happens, and like I said, you just said it just now. Like that's what happens with rock stars. Mm-hmm. You go around and you just have everybody telling you all the time how awesome you are. You're going to start to believe it after a while.
Yeah, and it
even
sounds
if
like
it's not true.
a lot of the stuff about putting on these big shows and stuff sounds like an attempt of being kind of like a man of the people. That's what he's trying to.
And like, hey, free food, everybody.
Yeah, he's trying to get the people on his side. That's what it sounds like.
Which did work for a while.
Yeah.
Until later.
Yeah, and then it's about time to take a break, so...
Yeah, I was actually just going to say, okay, so, like, that whole thing happened, he wasn't allowed to enter the contracts with anybody, so his credit started going down the toilet, he started going into debt, and all this other kind of shit happened, and that's where we're going to leave it at the break, and then when we get back, we're going to talk about what Gilles de Rais is probably most famous for, all
these murders.
All of that satanic murder stuff,
right.
Which, like I said, we'll get into whether we think it's really happened or not, because like I said, this is kind of a Countess Bathory situation.
Yeah, and there were some kind of gray areas with the Countess.
Yeah.
But I tend to think that the Countess did do that.
I think that her shit was exaggerated, but I think she probably did some horrible shit.
Yeah, I think she did.
But I don't think it was as bad egregious as it's given. And that might be the case.
There were just too many complaints about the Countess, and there were too many witnesses of what the investigators showed up and what they found.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give it to the investigators.
Yeah, I mean, that might not be the case here, so there might be some difference there, but we'll see. So we're going to take a break right now, and when we come back, we're going to talk some more about the quote-unquote real Bluebeard, Gilles de Rais. The Faceless Villain, a collection of the eeriest unsolved murders of the 20th century, Volume 2, includes cases spanning the years from 1960 through 1979, featuring such infamous crimes as the triple homicide at Lake Bodom, the family massacre known as the Good Heart Murders, the serial killings of the Zodiac, Bible John, Jack the Stripper, and the Freeway Phantom, the slaughter of dozens of women and girls along the Highway of Tears and the Texas Killing Fields, and the mysterious death of suspected spy, the Isdal woman, along with dozens of other fascinating and horrifying accounts. Buy it now from Amazon in print, Kindle, or audiobook format.
What you doing, baby girl? Yeah. Oh, you look awful sleepy. Yeah, you sleepy.
All right, we are back talking about Gilles de Rais.
Headed into our second hour. Everybody loves these second hour shows, these 2-hour shows anyway.
Well, it's funny because we never intended to make the show twice as long as we started out.
Yeah, start off as an hour-long show.
It's just that we just start yapping and, before
and everybody likes all this little side shit that we do. We start going down this way and then talk about crazy shit. And
yeah.
Most people are they're in their commute or they're doing housework or they're, commuting to work in the morning, just there's no way that, I'm drinking.
Yeah, no kidding.
They're fucking cuddled up in bed, headphones on, I do the same thing,
Yeah.
I listen to other people's content and other people listen to our content.
I know.
That's
how the world
goes
cycle. Around. Yeah.
It's like a cycle.
Circle of life.
It's like capitalism. One buying from the other and spending money. It's trading. We're going to trade.
That's what we're all doing, yeah. All right, so now that we've gone kind of into the background of Gilles de Rais, we're going to get to the good stuff, which is the stuff that he's kind of best known for, which is the satanic murder and demon summoning and child murder type stuff. So here we go. Now, Gilles de Rais, in some circles, is considered one of the very earliest serial killers. By some estimations, he is said to have killed over 100 children. Now, there is a lot of controversy around that number, and some people are of the opinion that he didn't really kill anybody, and this shit was all made up later on for various reasons.
Well, I asked you, back when we first started planning for this show, I asked you a few questions about this, and you answered the questions, and I right away went, no. Because for a crime to have been committed, there has to be evidence. There has to be certain kinds of testimony. And it doesn't look like it's there. But why don't you go ahead and start from the beginning. How does this part of the story start? What happened? Why did this guy get accused of this?
Now, as I said, I read a bunch of different sources of this. I read the Wikipedia article, I read Britannica, I watched a whole bunch of documentaries about it. Now, no source seems to agree on where these stories about this began. A lot of the information that we have about Gilles de Rais, as far as I can determine, came from testimony at his trial.
Okay.
Now, I have heard that there were rumors about children disappearing around his castle, like before he was arrested, but I'm not sure who started those rumors. If it was like family members of his, or if it was people that didn't like him, or something like that.
Is the testimony available?
Yeah.
Okay. Where is it? Somewhere in France in written form?
Yeah.
Okay.
And actually, I think there's a book. I think the woman's name is Juby, her last name. I can't remember what her first name is. But I think she wrote a biography of him, and she actually went through and translated a lot of the trial transcripts from, I think they were originally in Latin or French, and she translated them into English, and she went back to a lot of the source material. And so a lot of that is in there. I haven't read the book, but I kind of went through a couple summaries of it. So, so like I said, no one is quite sure where the rumors began, but so the story goes. In 1438, apparently what Gilles de Rais did was because he was getting worried about being broke dick because everyone had taken all his money away or he had spent all of it and then they wouldn't let him have any more. So he allegedly asked around because he wanted to contact an alchemist that would presumably help him make some gold.
Now, some people might call bullshit on this, saying that alchemy, they didn't believe in that in the 1500s. They believed in that almost into the 1800s.
They absolutely did.
All right. Fucking... yes, they believed that way into the 1700s. I mean, what's his name? The guy who invented physics. What's his name again? Fucking one of the greatest scientific minds of all time.
Newton?
Isaac Newton was an alchemist.
He was?
Yeah, did you know that?
Yes, I did.
He was a fucking alchemist. He believed.
I've read a couple of biographies of him.
He believed in alchemy.
I know.
And so yeah, that's how he got the job protecting the treasury in England, is because he said that he could catch alchemists because he believed in it, and that he believed alchemists were out there trying to make gold, which might actually
to them they just saw it as like they didn't see it as like, ooh, it's magic.
It was not a pseudoscience.
It was like chemistry.
You're right. It was chemistry. Is what they were talking about. Chemistry. That's what they were talking about.
That's all it was.
Even though chemistry involved spirits too, it was.
Yeah, but like I said, it was kind of a gray area. I mean, to them, it seemed like a science.
They were Christians, so Christians believed in spirits, and they believed in science. So you know, what I mean, you must be a spiritual element to chemistry. That's what. Yeah,
it wasn't like as weird.
It's not as crazy as you think.
It doesn't seem as weird. So he allegedly wanted to contact an alchemist so he could make some gold and get all his wealth back, so he could apparently keep spending all the money on plays and castles and whatever else. Fast cars, loose women.
Yeah.
You know. So he finds this Italian dude named Perroult. And apparently this guy has, written some books about alchemy and is really into the shit. So they kind of get together and start trying to make some gold. So apparently they try the ritual 3 times and it doesn't work, shockingly. So Gilles de Rais apparently gets kind of pissed off about this and he's like, what the fuck, man? I thought you were an alchemist and you could make me some gold. And then Perroult, allegedly, says, oh, well, I guess it's not going to work because we need a human sacrifice. We basically need to summon a demon. Most of the sources say the demon they summoned was named Baron or Baron, if you want to be French about it.
Baron. Yeah.
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 To actually, who I guess was going to bring them the gold.
Yeah.
So they had to do a human sacrifice. So allegedly, the first one that they did, they had to put pieces of a kid or a baby in a glass vial and give it to the demon. Yeah. And I think it was eyeballs, heart, and one other thing. It was either ears or hands or finger. I don't remember what the other thing was.
This is actually going beyond alchemy. This is getting into witchcraft.
Well, yeah.
Because alchemy really, when you looked, alchemy was not witchcraft.
Yeah.
Most alchemists actually, who were really trying to do it, were looking for purity of soul and spirit, and they were trying to find the philosopher's stone, which could only be found within the self. You know what I mean? Even though alchemy was illegal, alchemy was not evil. Okay. The reason why alchemy was illegal is because they didn't want people making gold. If you could make gold, then you could undermine the coffers and the treasures, the treasury of kingdoms. So they didn't want that. So it wasn't because it was evil. But now you got guys talking about we're going to sacrifice babies.
Yeah, like
that
I said,
sounds like witchcraft.
It kind of shaded over into like, oh, I'll make you some money, into hey, let's kill a baby.
Right.
I mean, purportedly, this is what, like I said, I think all of the stuff that we know about him comes from trial transcripts and like witness testimony and stuff like that. So how true is any of it? I'm not really sure, but this is how the story goes. I'm just saying.
This is how the story goes. This is not how it really happened. I'm already calling bullshit, but go ahead. You know I'm going to call bullshit? Because if you hire an alchemist, he's not going to fucking have you sacrifice babies to make gold. Yeah. No alchemist actually I've ever read about.
Yeah, that seems like a different thing.
With that. That's like that. This is witchcraft we're talking about. But go ahead. Go ahead. I mean, it's a possibility.
Yeah.
But
now, as I said, there had been rumors circulating. Who started them, I don't know. But there had been rumors circulating that there had been kids that had gone missing around, much like in the case of Countess Bathory, there had been kids that had gone missing, like, around his castle, were never seen again, blah-de-blah. Now, this was the 1400s, and as we said before, people didn't really have a concept of, like, childhood, per se. Yeah. So it's like, as soon as you had a kid that was, like, of age, they're just like, hey, take this kid and make him a page, or make him... So it wasn't, like, weird to send your kid off to, like, live with some dude somewhere.
You were supposed to send your kids off.
Yeah, basically, to go work in their house.
They were a source of income.
Right. So it wouldn't have been seen as strange. But apparently there were rumors circulating that kids would go in there, like, he would offer them jobs and they would go missing. Like I said, these were rumors. I don't know who started them. And I don't know how accurate they were. But because they kind of reached a fever pitch, Gilles de Rais did eventually get arrested, along with several of his, servants and, people who worked in his house. Now, at the trial, Gilles de Rais did give a very detailed confession. Now, I don't believe that they actually tortured him, but they did threaten to torture him, and I believe they also threatened to excommunicate him if he didn't confess to all the shit that he did.
Well, shit, back in those days, that was enough.
Right.
Because you knew what torture would be, so you might as well go ahead and confess.
So that's why I kind of... I mean, pretty much anything anybody says under torture or threat of torture, that's... you just can't... It might be true, it might not be true. I don't think there's...
put the hot irons to somebody, you screw down on somebody's thumbs, and you do all that shit that they did to people long enough, you'll get them to say anything.
That's what I mean. They'll say anything. And like I said, we did a show on the witch trials. Yeah. Obviously, those women that were hanged or burned in Europe, I don't think they did any of the shit that they were accused of doing. But obviously, if you, like, put thumb screws on people or put people in Iron Maidens, they'll just be like, yeah, what do you want me to say? Just write the shit down and I'll sign it. Just stop doing this.
Torture is ineffective when it comes to trying to get somebody to confess to fucking spiritual crimes and all kinds of shit that can't be verified anyway. Not to say that torture doesn't work. Torture works. But it has to be, you have to be asking people questions that can be verified.
That's what I mean. It's like, if
you're not... Like, you can capture an enemy soldier and beat on him and he can tell you something, and if you can verify it, then it worked. But you can't torture a person and get them to fucking confess to fucking worshiping the devil and doing all this other kind of shit and be able to verify and go, yeah, that shit worked.
Yeah, he totally did summon a demon.
He totally did kiss the ass of the devil. He did that. Yeah. No, it's a false confession. Didn't work. Sorry, I got it. Getting excited.
I know. I thought you were going to knock that over.
No, it's all right.
I said, one of my
You guys
favorite.
didn't know I got a little table here. I fucking put my.
And the
Kukulkan
table
on.
is like.
This is the table of Kukulkan.
It's not the most stable.
No, it's like 6 inches by 6 inches.
And it's just made of like balsa wood or
No,
something.
that's bamboo.
So it's like every
Black
time.
bamboo.
So every time he
Black
does
bamboo.
this show and gets straight, and he's like starts
Yeah.
flailing around, I'm always afraid he's gonna knock it
Black
over.
bamboo is the original Japanese plastic. That's a fucking wonder material. Did you know that?
That's only black because I painted it.
Yeah, but I'm just saying. I just said it's black bamboo. No, well, it's black bamboo. It's bamboo.
I know it's bamboo.
I'm just saying it's bamboo.
I'm just saying it's black because I painted it. It wasn't black originally.
But I'm telling you, bamboo is Japanese original plastic. You can actually make a gun out of bamboo. Just ask fucking.
Yeah, I know.
Just ask fucking Captain Kirk. That's what he shot the Gorn with.
I can't ask
Okay.
Captain Kirk because he's a fictional character. But yeah, so okay. Now, according to after they arrested Gilles de Rais and all his little quote unquote henchmen, he pretty much they said, okay, well we're gonna torture you if you don't tell us stuff, and he's like, okay, we'll sit right down. I'm gonna tell you. So apparently he gave like a really detailed confession. Now, according to his confession, the first child murders started in 1432. And he said that he'd done the first ones at this one castle that he had to, and then he moved to this other castle. Now, he said at this one particular location that he had killed or he had either killed them himself or he had told like his servants to kill them, but that he had sodomized them first. Now, there was this one particular case, and I'm not sure what year this is from, but there was a case of a little boy. He was 12 years old, and his first name, or his last name, rather, was Joudon. Now, he was a furrier's apprentice. Now, according to witness testimony, this boy was approached, or his parents were approached, not by Gilles de Rais, but by Gilles de Rais' cousin, or two of his cousins, who came and said, hey, can we borrow this kid for a minute because we want him to like run an errand?
I thought you were going to think we borrow this kid. We want to sodomize him.
Well, they're not going to say that out loud. Yeah, let me just borrow this kid.
We borrow
for a
this
second.
kid because we
we'll
want
bring
to
him right back.
sodomize him. We're bringing him back.
Bring him right back.
Shit, back in those days that might have flown. I don't know.
It probably would have, sadly enough.
We want to bugger this kid. We'll be bringing him back in a minute. Okay, go ahead.
I'll give you $20.
Here's 20 shillings.
At which point the parents would be like, okay.
Yeah.
They probably would have. So they wanted to borrow him to like run an errand, like to like send a message to somebody or something like that. He was like an errand boy. Now they took him away and the boy did not come back. So then they go to the two cousins and they're just like, hey, what the fuck? Where's that kid that we loaned you? And they said, I don't know. Like, he did what we asked him to do, and then we didn't see him again. Maybe, like, thieves took him or something. You know, who knows what could happen.
They sold him to the Arabs.
Right. So
he's in a Turkish fucking harem now.
Yeah, so it's like that was the excuse they gave. Now, this particular story was apparently at the trial, they had the furrier, this kid was his apprentice, and the furrier's wife both gave testimony, and they said, yeah, we loaned that kid to these two noblemen and then we didn't see him again. They also talked to the boy's dad and a few other people from the town that said, yeah, that totally happened. So I don't know if that really happened or not, but apparently this kid disappeared after going off with not Gilles de Rais, but two of his cousins. After they had asked if they could borrow the kid for reasons that's just like a funny.
Can we borrow that kid?
Let me borrow your kid for a second. Just for a second.
He's soft and tender. We would like to borrow him. Here's 30 shillings.
Yeah.
French skillings.
Or whatever they
were.
What was it, a sou?
I don't know, man. I've got a Mississippi story to tell you.
Uh-oh. Here we go.
Back in the day, my grandmother went into a dried out lake bed with a metal detector one time. Found a piece of metal. You know what it was? I still got it. It was a little 5 dense skilling from like 16 something or other.
Huh.
Yeah, my dad's got it. Yeah. I don't know anything about it.
You should take it to like Why don't you should take it somewhere and get it appraised.
A Densk skilling. I think it was 5. But it was like from 16 something or other.
Huh.
Run around outside Laurel, Mississippi.
Somebody back in 16 something or other was going to the...
I think they were fishing.
Was going to the 1600 7-Eleven to get some cigarettes, and they dropped their change.
They must have been fishing along the bank. It was a pretty small lake, at the time that it had water in it. And it dried out in my grandmother's time. It only had a few feet of water in it, and a few years later it was gone. And she walked out there with a metal detector that her husband had gotten her at the time, and she found it out in the deep part, which would have been about 20 feet deep. But it was within an arm's toss of the bank. So somebody must have been on the bank fishing and skipped a coin across the water. That's what she thought.
Okay. That makes sense to me.
But I don't know what a Densk skilling is.
Densk.
Densk. It's a D-E-N-S-K-E.
Ooh.
S-K-I-L-L-I-N. I don't think it even had a G. Maybe it did have a G.
That sounds Scandinavian.
Yeah. It was from the 1600s.
Interesting.
In Mississippi, of all fucking places.
I just wrote an article the other day about all of these, because I started writing articles for Steve Mera and Zohar Entertainment, just about various ancient mysteries and all that kind of stuff. And I was writing one about all of those weird, even in the United States, there's some in fucking, Maine and shit, where they think it's, Viking runes and stuff, carved on rocks and whatnot.
Yeah.
Most of them are fakes. I think they've pretty much determined that most of them are fakes.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, the Vikings, they were up in Newfoundland and stuff like that, but they don't think any of them came down to Oklahoma. But there's a bunch of stones in Oklahoma that have shit that sort of looks like runes on it, even though it doesn't really spell anything.
Actually, it would not surprise me.
It's not crazy.
It's not crazy that Vikings made it here a long, long time ago.
They were here.
And it would not surprise me if there was some Viking stuff that was found. But, I don't think they made any settlements. We're talking about maybe 10 guys that made it ashore, walked around for a while, killed a few Indians. Indians killed a few of them, and then they just died out. Because Vikings had a bad habit of attacking and killing Skraelings.
Yeah.
To see if they were immortal or not. That's what that.
Here, hold on just a second. I want to see if you can live through this.
We got to make sure you're not immortal. Still over there. No. That's
shit.
Okay.
We keep doing that.
Yeah, it's not an elf. It's just a mortal Skraeling.
Oh my
That's all
God.
it is.
If I ever murder anybody, I'm totally using that as a defense at my trial. I was checking. I thought they
to see
were
if
immortal.
He was immortal, right?
I really thought he was going to live through that shit.
Yeah.
Judge. Promise.
We had to know. So you know what I mean. They weren't the brightest of people. They were strong, but they didn't think things through. They saw things through their cultural lens.
Well, stab first, ask questions later.
Right. But I'm sure there were a lot of them. I wouldn't think that they made it as far as the West Coast. I mean, that's a fucking hell
I don't
of a
think
journey.
most of the ones that I wrote about were from the Midwest. Oklahoma, that type of thing.
But that wasn't like a forest. That was grassland.
Yeah.
I could see that maybe you could walk out that far and survive it. As soon as you hit them Sierra Nevada mountains,
I think most of them are
outside
fake.
Because
most of them don't look particularly weathered, and most of them are
contrary.
most of them are kind of a combination of letters and words from different time periods and different alphabets.
Contrary to what your average motherfucker thinks today, this is not Indian territory. Everybody walked here. They walked here across land bridges. You had white people from Europe walking across ice sheets 10, 15,000 years ago. This place was always a big kind of racial melting pot of the entire world. They've been coming here for 20,000 years. You know what I mean? It wasn't until that damn flat-faced bear went extinct that a human could live here. When was that? About 25,000 years, I think?
Something like that.
Something like that. So people have made it here by accident for 25,000 years. And you never really... It would not surprise me if the Chinese came here.
Some people think they did.
Because they found Chinese boat anchors off the coast of California that maybe dated back 500 years.
I've read a book called 1491, the year China discovered America, or something like that. That kind of was arguing for that hypothesis. I'm not taking a stand on that. It might be true. It might not be.
Some people got these vested arguments. And
I don't really have. I don't have a dog in that fight. If China discovered it, that's fine with me.
Land doesn't belong to anybody. It's constantly being taken by somebody else. When we all nobody sprouts up out of the ground. You know, we're all from Africa, and we conquered the rest of the shit.
That's true.
That's how it really goes.
We all came from Africa. If you go back far enough,
and we've all been taking shit from other people. And
give me that.
Give me that. Fuck off this land.
All right. So now, okay. So some other people that gave testimony at the trial, including like some of Gilles de Rais' servants, who they also tortured or threatened with torture, it should be noted, said how Gilles de Rais would do with all these kids that he kidnapped. Now, what they said that he would do, he's like, he'd take the kid, usually boys, but sometimes it was girls. He would take the kid and he would dress him up super, super nice. He would give them like this really big dinner, like all this really nice lavish food, some booze. He'd give him some this kind of drink that was like a stimulant. It was called Hippocras, I think. That would kind of like, you know, get them all revved up or whatever.
Talking about roofies.
Yeah, something. Well, no, it's not roofies.
Roofie.
It was more like Coke. I think it was more like cocaine, honestly, because it was like it was a stimulant. It wasn't like roofies. Roofies just put you to sleep, so people can rape you. Yeah. But I know I've been slipped those a couple of times.
I was there though. I saved you.
No. This was before I met you.
Oh, before that. Okay.
Yeah. If you've never been roofied, I don't recommend it. But it was the weirdest experience ever. This was when I was married to my first husband. Yeah. And I was just like, I had seriously, and I drink a lot. I'm not an alcoholic, I promise. It's like, but I drink a lot, so
we're club people.
I have a high alcohol tolerance. I had literally drunk maybe not even half, maybe like a third of a drink, and it was like probably vodka and cranberry, something like that. So it was like this much alcohol, seriously. I drank it, and I'm sitting there listening to the 80s music or whatever, and then all of a sudden, I turned to my friend, Nicole, and I'm like, babe, I don't feel so good. And then all of a sudden, I just went, and I just fell asleep, like fell off my stool.
Yeah, they got you. Yeah.
And so it was literally like that.
Yeah. Somebody got me. I nearly attacked a damn band called the Swans one time when somebody got me. Yeah, but that was
a different thing, though.
That was something else. I don't know what somebody...
This was...
I think it was meant for you. I think, but I got it for some reason.
I mean, I've had it done to me several times, and I'm sure probably every woman in the audience has had it happen to them at some point if they go to bars or anything. I've had it happen to me, I think, 3 times. But the first time, it was like I didn't even know what was going on. It was like 11 o'clock, and yeah, seriously, I took a drink, and then I remember distinctly saying, I don't feel so good, and then I just fell off my stool asleep. Yeah. Now, the next thing I remember was my then husband driving me home. I was in the passenger seat. I woke up and I was barfing into my lap.
Yeah, he's probably bitching at you, wasn't he? He probably thought it was all your fault.
Well, everything's my fault.
Yeah, okay.
So, at all times.
No, did he know somebody slipped you something?
Yeah, he figured. He figured because I
you weren't there long enough.
Yeah, I had never done that before, right. And yeah, we'd only been there for like I had literally drunk half of my first drink. Yeah. You know what I mean? And for me to just like fall asleep in the middle of the floor, I had never done that before. So yeah. All right. So getting back to, like I said, we got all distracted about the stimulants and,
I had to go to the bathroom.
And roofies and whatnot. So apparently he would give them this drink that was like a stimulant or whatever. And then, you know, after this big meal and after like dressing them up in fancy clothes and everything, then apparently Gilles de Rais would take them up to this like private chamber, like this private bedroom or whatever. And then he would like spring it on them. Hey, guess what? I'm going to kill you. Because allegedly, he liked the shock that would engender. Like when he actually told the kid, hey, you just had the most awesome day ever. Like I gave you all this nice food and nice clothes and everything. And now I'm going to cut your head off. Yeah. So apparently he kind of got off on that. Now, one of Gilles de Rais had what they call a body servant, which what the fuck is that? Is that somebody that
Somebody
like
dresses
washes
you.
your ass or
Yeah, maybe that's what it is, and to dress you
and then
to
dresses
fucking-
you and stuff?
like a groom.
I never heard of it called a body servant though.
They're talking about like a horse groom, somebody that fucking grooms you and cuts your hair and
Dresses
shaves
you and washes
probably,
you.
yeah, that's right. What
I
they're
need
talking
one of
about.
those.
Yeah. Labor was so cheap back then.
That would
You
save
could
me a
have
lot.
that.
You could have a guy just specifically
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah.
It's
Pop
like,
your
oh,
zits for you.
This is my toenail clipper guy.
Yeah.
And you have one for like each. This is my nose clipper, like my
Yeah.
nose hair clipper guy.
He's a pro. He can fucking take care of my body.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe you have a bunch of them like specific to like each part of your body. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how you roll. I'm just saying. So he had a quote unquote body servant named Etienne, who they called him Poitou. I don't know why. But he was apparently like an accomplice in a lot of these crimes. And I think he actually got burned at the stake later on for some of this shit. Now he said, like I said, take this with a grain of salt because it was either torture or threat of torture that this story came out. He said that what Gilles de Rais would do was he would take the kid, like I said, almost always boys, but there were some girls too, so it wasn't just a boy thing. So he would take the kid, he would strip him naked, he would hang him up with like from a hook, and then he would jerk off on the kid's stomach or on his legs or whatever. Now, if the victim was a boy, he would like fondle his balls and his butt and everything like that, like you do.
Yeah.
Then
like
he
you
would,
do,
then he would take the kid down from the hook. This is like some Leatherface.
Now, I
shit
guess
right
the
here.
hook was in his back.
I
Hung him up-
guess.
It doesn't really say.
I don't know if he actually put the hook. Like I said, I don't know if it was like a Leatherface situation where he actually like hooked it up there like meat, or if he just had. Like if he just had like a rope around his chest or something
Yeah,
and
and
hung
then
it from a
hung
hook
a
or
hook,
something.
right,
I don't
yeah,
really
okay.
know. It's not very clear.
Was the kid alive when all this was going on?
Well, yeah, clearly.
Okay. Because I think that would kill the kid. Put him
Yeah.
on a hook. All right.
Well, yeah, because it would go all the way through.
Maybe not. I mean, fucking depends on the trauma level.
True.
How thick the hook was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So then apparently, so after that whole thing happens, like after he's done cupping the kid's balls or whatever, then he takes. I'm just saying this. I'm not making this up.
You're imagining the shit. Well, okay, go ahead.
I'm not imagining
Okay.
it.
Cupping his balls. He's just cupping his balls.
Well, they said fondling,
Okay.
and I just assumed. I mean,
All right,
fondling, cupping.
okay.
It's
All right.
look at this thesaurus. It's the
Okay.
same thing.
Okay.
So,
I'm just gonna let you ride with it. Go ahead.
why are you doing this? I don't know.
I don't think. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so he brings the kid down after all the molestation, and then he supposedly tells the kid, "Oh, everything's gonna be okay. I just wanted to play with you. I'm not really gonna do anything bad." And then he or one of his cousins is like, "Psych!" And then he either cuts the kid's head off, or dismembers them, or takes a stick and breaks their neck, or something like that. He also had, apparently, according to the body servant, quote unquote, they had like this little sword that they kind of kept around for just this purpose, like for kid killing purposes,
Right, yeah,
like
kid
you
killing
have
sword.
around, Got to have one in every room just in
Okay.
case. You never know when that situation's going to arise. So,
Got to have a kid killing sword.
right.
Yeah.
Maybe he had one for everybody. I don't know. So this is fucked up. So yeah. Now, one thing that I found on Wikipedia that's apparently a quote, and this I think was a quote from the trial transcripts from the body servant Poitou, who said, and I'm not sure if I'm reading this correctly, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but according to him, Gilles de Rais disdained the victim's sexual organs and took infinitely more pleasure in debauching himself in this manner than in using their natural orifice in the normal manner. Now, from how
What the hell does that mean?
from how I read that, it
Yeah.
sounded like it meant that he would cut their head off and fuck the neck hole. Am I
Wait,
wrong?
hold on. No, go back again. What is this? How
Because
Read
what?
it.
Okay, now what it says on the Wikipedia page
yeah.
is that Gilles de Rais sometimes abused the victims before wounding them, and at other times after the victim had been slashed in the throat or decapitated.
Right.
And then his manservant says, that he disdained the victim's sexual organs, like he's like, fuck that shit.
Right.
And took infinitely more pleasure in debauching himself in this manner, decapitation, I guess,
right,
than in using their natural orifice in a normal manner. Which, like I said, I took that to mean that he cut off their heads and fucked the neck hole. That's what it sounds like he's talking about. I don't know if that's correct or not, but that's...
Sounds like...
I thought that's what he was talking about.
Sounds like he didn't like sexual organs, and he didn't like normal orifices.
Except for all the ball cupping.
What he liked was cutting the heads off. That's what it sounded like to me, but, you know... I don't know. It's hard to say.
Well, debauching himself...
Debauching himself means getting off on it?
Yeah, so I thought that he meant that he was fucking the neck hole.
The neck hole. The hole...
left when he decapitated. I mean, I could be wrong about that, but that's...
This was under torture.
Or threat of torture. That's what it sounded like to me. Yeah. So, take that as you will. But that's kind of what it sounded like he was talking about. Now, Gilles de Rais also said in his own confession that after the children were dead, he kissed them, and those who had the most handsome limbs and heads... Ooh, what a nice elbow you have. Yeah. Weird. He held them up to admire them and had their bodies cruelly cut open and took delight at the sight of their inner organs. And very often when the children were dying, he sat on their stomachs and took pleasure in seeing them die and laughed. So, now that was apparently out of his own mouth, or at least in the trial, the confession from the trial that survives to this day.
That's what they wrote down.
So maybe they wrote it and they just said, hey, we're going to torture you if you don't sign this. And he's just like, yeah, whatever. And didn't read it. I don't know. But that's what was in there. So that was like taken as his confession. Like that's what he wrote about what he did.
Okay. Is there anything else?
Yeah, there's some other shit.
Okay. What else?
Now, they said that the reason, because as far as I can determine, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think they ever found any quote-unquote physical evidence. I don't think they ever found any bodies.
This is the problem. This is the problem.
That's what I mean. I don't think they ever found any bodies or anything like that. And Gilles de Rais did actually have a lot of friends of his and like other acquaintances that apparently came forward and said, no, he didn't do any of that shit. I was in his castle all the time. There was none of this shit going on. But apparently none of that really made it into the trial transcripts, or they didn't want to hear it or whatever. So what the servants and shit said they would do is like, oh, well, after we killed all these kids, like hundreds of them, apparently, because I think I've seen some estimates like up to 600, which seems crazy.
Hold on. Question.
But what?
Were there complaints of kids missing? Do they have parents saying...
I said that before. But like I said...
How many were we talking about?
I'm not sure how accurate that is, because there were like quote-unquote rumors circulating that kids were going missing, but I don't really know, other than that one kid that that the cousins asked to quote-unquote borrow.
That was cousins, though. That wasn't him.
Yeah, and the thing is... They could be correct about that. They could have had the kid come and do a thing, and then the kid took off and got kidnapped by someone else. It's like, that's circumstantial.
Right.
I'm not saying that it didn't happen. I'm just saying that if that was at trial nowadays, that wouldn't fly.
Okay, what else is going on?
Because there's too much other shit
I'm already kind of like...
So, now the servant said that the reason that no bodies were found was because what they would do is that after... Gilles de Rais had done all his whatever, like fucking the neckles or whatever the fuck he did with the bodies, allegedly, that they would either throw them in the fireplace and burn them, and then they would like put the stuff in the cesspit, or, you know, they would put them in the moat or things like that. Which seems a little weird, because you would think they would at least find bone fragments or skulls or something like that, like after all this time. And as far as I know, they have never found anything like that.
Yeah, burning bodies does not get rid of the body.
That's what I'm saying. It's like, yeah, you can say, oh, I burned it and it's all gone. Yeah, that's not how that works.
That isn't how that works.
I mean, even like crematoriums, that has to be like some really high temperature shit. And even then, they have to crush the bones up at the end, there's like to give you the shit, the ashes. There's still like a bunch of bones left over.
Still a lot of fragments, right?
Right. So it has to be like super high temperature before the body is completely obliterated. And even then, you still have to like crunch it up.
Right.
I'm just saying. So
and really, when you look through history, there's been no serial killer that has effectively gotten rid of a body through fire. They don't do it that way.
No. And the reason they don't do it, it's
too hard.
It's hard, and it's not as effective as people think it is.
It's much
easier.
Even
dissolving a body in acid.
It's not effective.
doesn't work because teeth and gallstones are not dissolved by acid. Pro tip.
The best way to get rid of a body is to bury it in a place where it will
Where
never
no
be
one will
found.
find it.
Right. And that's
clearly the best thing to do.
That's hard to do in France in that time.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about an area that even in the 1500s was heavily populated.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You couldn't have a big cache of buried bodies go undetected for long, especially when you're talking about hundreds or thousands of bodies. No, fuck no. No.
Yeah.
What that does to the soil, what it looks like, no, it doesn't work. It doesn't work that way.
Now, another thing that happened too, and this happened a little bit later, was that in May of 1440, now this actually did happen as far as I can determine. Gilles de Rais got into a sort of property dispute with a cleric named Jean Le Ferron. Now, I'm not sure entirely what the details of this are, but I think Jean Le Ferron had either purchased one of his properties or was squatting there or was staying there or something, and Gilles de Rais was not happy about it, and he wanted this particular property back, so he kind of went in there. The cleric wouldn't leave, so he decided that he was going to beat and kidnap him.
Evicted the shit out of that dude.
So this was another kind of mark against him, because even though, like, most of the kids that were allegedly kidnapped and murdered and sodomized and whatnot by Gilles de Rais were peasant children, kidnapping and beating up a cleric was a more serious crime than kidnapping and murdering peasant children, sadly.
That would still get you probably dead doing that to fucking peasant kids, even back in the 1500s.
Well, a lot of things would get you dead back then. I mean, even like just blasphemy, I think, would get you burned at the stake, right?
They would say that you were a Satanist.
Look at Joan of Arc; she didn't fucking do anything.
And I think homosexuality was enough to do that. So
yeah,
what they
because
would say
I
is,
think that was one of the charges against
They would say you killed these peasant kids and you raped them. That means that you're a sodomite and you're an evil Satanist. You got to die.
Yes,
that's what they would say. And
that was definitely one of so the fact that this shit happened with the cleric, whether or not it was not related to like the kid murders or anything like that, the alleged kid murders, but that was kind of another mark against him. So when he was actually arrested, like I said, it was him and two of his servants were arrested in September of 1440, and they were actually charged with murder, sodomy, and heresy or witchcraft, performing witchcraft, whatever, because of the whole demon summoning and whatnot. So, as I said, this is like, from the trial testimony, it appears that Gilles de Rais may have killed between 80 and 200 children, some estimates as high as 600. As I said, I'm not sure how accurate this is because it's pretty much based entirely on witness testimony that came from, either torture or threat of torture. Now, so they hear all these people talking about it. As far as I know, like I said, they did have some testimony from like peasants in the area that said, yeah, my kid went missing and it seemed like weird because it was kind of around the castle or whatever. But again, that's circumstantial because there was so much other shit going on. There were thieves on the road. There were people, you let your kid like run around loose and you weren't really supervising them. It's like, who knows what could have happened.
Or they just run away.
Or they could have just run away.
So that's it for the testimony?
No. Well, I'm not saying that the shit didn't happen. I'm just saying that the circumstances are, it's all circumstantial evidence. I'm just saying they didn't find any physical evidence. So now, after the court heard the testimony of Gilles de Rais' two servants, who were named Poitou, like I said, and Henriet. Now, they were both condemned to death. They were found guilty, condemned to death, and they were actually both, I think they were hanged first and then burned, and they were just burned entirely down to nothing, and their ashes were scattered. Now, Gilles de Rais was also found guilty, murder, sodomy, witchcraft, whatever. And he was also given a death sentence. Now, from what I've heard, normally what they would do is they would hang you and then they would burn your body. But they wouldn't bury you like in hallowed ground or whatever because you did all this horrible shit against
Yeah, you didn't
the
get
church.
Christian burial.
But he did. Gilles de Rais did get a Christian burial. I mean, he asked for one, and you would think that if he had done all the shit that they said that he did, that the church would have said no.
How was he executed again?
He was hanged and then burned.
Okay.
Yeah.
But he was given a Christian burial.
Yeah, and now I'm not
That's
sure.
awful. That's strange.
See, that's what I mean. I think that was kind of not widely known until later on, like after, as far as I know, this woman that wrote this book later on, and she translated a lot of the shit from the time, like out of Latin and out of French and stuff. And she's like, I think they were trying to keep that a secret that he had a Christian burial. He had asked for one, but as I said, if he had done what they said that he did, then I don't think the church would have granted him that. But they did.
That's evidence to support the idea that possibly that the church knew that the allegations were false.
That's kind of what people are saying. Yeah. They're like, the fact that they actually did go ahead and go, yeah, just like give him a Christian burial, but like keep it on the DL. Right. That seems to suggest that they knew that the charges were either entirely false or were wildly exaggerated.
Well, I'm going to tell you right now, man, this whole shit's fishy.
It does sound very fishy.
You kill 600 kids, you're going to find bodies.
I mean,
where are these fucking
100,
bodies?
Even 100.
Even 100, even 20. Yeah. Even 15. Where are these bodies?
Exactly.
And why they would have tortured a motherfucker, all right? And under torture, he would have given them the exact location of these bodies. They would have dug those bodies up and shown those little kids' skeletons to people and said, he did it.
Yeah.
But they didn't. And
that's what I mean.
Because that's not what this was about.
I'm just always really, really wary of cases that are based entirely on witness testimony, especially back in those days.
That's not what this is about. You got a young guy with a shit ton of money. He's popular. He's charismatic.
He's spending money like a dumbass.
Spending money like he's like a celebrity. He's a man of the people. He's giving away free shows. He's buying all this shit. He's a war hero. This motherfucker's a threat, is what he is.
Yes,
he's a threat to the throne. Okay? He's very popular and he's got money. And he's investing in his own career. His family's complaining, hey, wait a minute, he's rocking the boat. He's putting our family fortune at jeopardy. Please stop this guy from spending all this money. But no, the guy continues on. He's a young guy. He's he's an upstart. Everybody likes him. Dude's a threat.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He has the money, the charisma, and the know-how and the military experience to actually buy his own army and actually overthrow the government. That's what I think this is about.
Yeah, and like I said, it should be noted, too, that after Gilles de Rais was executed, the Duke of Brittany got he got all the titles, not only to the shit that Gilles de Rais still had left over, because like I said, he had sold a lot of his properties off. He also got all the titles to the shit that Gilles de Rais had already sold off that was like in other people's, like he could have that too. So all of his wealth went to people that had a vested interest in prosecuting him. Yeah. So that really kind of gives me pause. Right. And you know what I mean? This was a long time ago. I'm not going to say that he didn't kill anybody or anything like that, but it seems a little sketchy.
I don't think he had anything to do with those killing those little kids.
It seems a little sketchy that everybody that had something to do with persecuting him stood to gain from his death.
It's sketchy
in a financial way.
It's sketchy that they couldn't produce not a single body of a child.
Yeah.
It's sketchy that they had not a single complaint from a parent come forward saying, my son went with him and he never came back.
Yeah.
It's fishy.
That's what I mean. I find this whole thing very fishy. Right. And like I said, it's kind of a case where, I mean, obviously this happened, in the 1400s. Yeah, there's no way lost, anyone's going to know one way or the other. But to me, it sounds very much like a witch hunt. I mean, it sounds very much like...
And when you talk about witch hunts, what comes to mind is like what happened here in the United States. You know, a lot of people that wrote about what happened in certain towns during witch houses. It's always the youngest, best-looking guy who is the most popular with the girls who's really good playing fiddle. It's always the really good-looking girl. It's always the motherfuckers that people are jealous of.
It's either jealousy or people that they want to get rid of.
Right. Well, and they usually want to get rid of people because of jealousy, too. They have money. Or maybe they do want to get rid of some old woman because she's a bitch. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
I feel like that was the issue. Apparently,
right.
In Salem, I think a lot of the problem there was the women were, they were either weird or people didn't like them.
Yeah.
Or they had land that other people wanted, or they had been like...
And there's money
or they were a thorn in someone's side.
And there's money to be made in a witch trial. All the fucking concessions that you can sell. You know what I mean? There was tickets and shit involved. You know what I mean?
Everybody would come out to see the hangings.
I mean, you know what I mean?
Again, they were kind of messed up.
But, if you ask me, this is money and political power. They're jealous of a young, up-and-coming, very popular guy. That's what I think happened here.
Yeah.
And they can't... You don't come at me with a body. You're accusing this guy of maybe killing up to 600 children. Produce one skeleton.
Yeah.
And then they didn't do that.
Well, and like I said, it's kind of a case where if he was tried nowadays, he would never get convicted.
No. And I'm going to say it's a little bit different with Bathory. With Countess Bathory, they evidently had investigators
there was some
show
evidence,
up to her place and say, yeah, we found girls...
there was blood in there.
In cages, and we found a dead girl here, and you know what I mean? Yeah, she was up to some shit. And then also there were peasants down in the towns saying that the girls were disappearing.
Yeah. Which was kind of the case in Gilles de Rais' thing, where some of the peasants were saying, "Oh yeah, I sent my kid off to."
But it wasn't at epidemic proportions.
But it wasn't really to the same extent, and right. I don't think it was as clear cut.
Yeah, those kids could have been found later after the trial, living in another town. There's a lot of stuff that can happen.
And like I said, I feel like too the trial transcripts that we have nowadays, I think a lot of that was left out, and I think some of it was exaggerated after the fact. To make him sound like more of a monster.
Yeah.
So, I'm not sure how seriously to take all of these allegations. And I know that Gilles de Rais is kind of like gone down in history as, one of the world's first serial killers, quote unquote. It being based on, Bluebeard being based on him and stuff like that. But I'm not really sure. Like I said, I'm not saying that he never killed anyone ever. I'm just saying that it seems a little strange that the whole trial was based on
torture evidence that came from torture.
Yeah, and like this
not
witness testimony. And I've seen some shit that
there was no evidence. It was just testimony.
Not really. There was no physical evidence.
No physical evidence.
And not that I know of. I couldn't find anything about any physical evidence
and I asked her, I said, was there physical evidence? Were there bodies? And she goes, no.
I don't think there was.
So was there any eyewitness testimony that came forth that you didn't have to torture somebody to tell you that? She was like, no. And
not that I know of.
And were there any complaints? Did anybody complain and come forward saying that my son disappeared? No, not really. They had to go out and find all that shit. So I'm going to say the way things were in those times and the background of this guy, man, this just stinks to high head.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of skeptical. I think maybe he was kind of the subject of.
They wanted his money.
Essentially, yeah. They just wanted him out of the way, and they wanted his stuff.
He was a threat to the powers.
Right, so I think they just kind of manufactured it. And I have seen a couple things, because like I said, I watched a bunch of different documentaries about this, and a lot of different, a lot of sources. I think the Encyclopedia Britannica still has it as like, he's a serial killer, he killed all these people and stuff, but, there is some controversy that exists still about it, which I find kind of interesting, but... I've seen some of the documentaries were kind of like, well, would anyone have really like made up like all these crazy stories
Yeah.
that these servants or stuff like that? I'm like,
Hell yeah.
have you read the transcripts from the Salem witch
Yeah.
trials, like the fucking batshit stuff they came up with?
Yeah, kissing the
They
ass
could
of the
make up
devil
all
and
kind of crazy things
and-
back then.
yeah.
And a lot of it was like was like biblical sources or like, you
Yeah.
know, other writings that were like based on biblical sources.
You're
I mean,
right.
that's some crazy shit.
yeah, fucking medieval Europeans.
They were very imaginative.
Yeah, medieval Europeans and Renaissance era Europeans were not good sources. They were liars. They lied a lot. Yeah, it's been proven. Especially if you fucking threaten to torture somebody,
Yeah.
they
I
knew the
mean-
deal. You had to lie.
Yeah.
If you put somebody in that situation, they were gonna fucking make up all kinds
and
of
like you
shit.
said, it's like sometimes the more outrageous the story is, the more
more it would be
likely
believed.
that people would believe
Right,
it.
yeah.
Because it's like, who would make up something like
Yeah,
that?
Niccolo
That
Machiavelli
person.
and fucking guys like Niccolo Machiavelli and of course fucking who's the other guy that I'm thinking of? Friedrich Nietzsche. They'll tell you that if you're gonna lie big,
Yeah.
because the more outrageous that lie is, the more the general population will
For
believe it to be
exactly that
true.
reason, because
'Cause they're
people's
saying,
like, why
no one
would
will
someone
ever
make that up?
shit. Right?
People can make up all
Yeah,
kind of shit.
yeah.
I'm a horror writer. I make up all kind of
Yeah.
shit. And it's
Little
like,
kids will come up with some
that's what I
crazy
mean.
ass shit.
It was- and
Yeah.
I think people underestimate other people's imaginations. You know what I mean? You can make up some crazy ass shit. And some of the stuff that I read, you know, in the Salem witch trials transcripts, that is some insane shit. And I think it's like on the level of this kind of thing. So I don't think it's completely outlandish to say that this stuff was all made up, because that was the kind of shit that they made up at this time period.
If you go through if you ever have to go through a trial or have to go, you know what I mean, into the criminal justice system, unfortunately, testimony plays a big part in a conviction. But they'll tell you in the jury instructions that testimony really isn't shit. Well, really what matters is physical evidence.
Well, yeah, because witness
people's
testimony
memories
is
and people lie.
notoriously
Right. It's
inaccurate.
notoriously inaccurate. So if you come at me with a case like this, oh, he killed 400 kids and blah, 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 and without any physical evidence, not even a single body, you're fucking full of shit. Come on.
Yeah, I'm kind of leaning toward...
And then you're talking about a guy who's rich and the ruling class has
And powerful,
everything to gain from taking this
from
guy's
taking
wealth.
him down, sure.
Yeah, then no. Come on.
And like I said, I feel like
I mean,
the
it was
same
a long
thing.
time ago. We will never know. We weren't there. But I'm saying just based on that right there, I'm going to say, fuck no, man. They made that shit up.
And honestly, in the early 1990s, even if there's still kind of a thing in France, because in France he's still, you know, largely considered like this monster. But in 1992, I think it was largely based on this book that this woman wrote, where she kind of like retranslated all the original, like all the contemporary source material. And she kind of came to the conclusion, was like, she didn't think he did anything, like he was completely innocent and that he was just completely railroaded because they wanted to get rid of him. So she kind of got together this big, like, it was more, it wasn't like an official trial or anything, but it was kind of like a big media blitz about how we're going to exonerate Gilles de Rais of all of this stuff, because he's been accused of, you know, all these centuries. He's been like accused of being like some monster. He's like Bluebeard, and he really didn't do anything. So she was kind of like behind this push to like get his name cleared, I guess. And what they did in 1992 in France was they had kind of like a media event where they had judges and lawyers and they had all kind of stuff. It wasn't, like I said, an official thing, but they sort of looked at all of the original evidence again, and then they exonerated him, because they said, you know, if this had come to trial today, there's no way that he would have been convicted of anything, because it was just
You got to produce at least
there
one
was
body.
no physical evidence. It was all witness. It was all witness testimony, and like I said, much of that witness testimony stemmed from, you know, people under duress, under torture or threat of torture, which, you know,
that's not worth anything.
Notoriously inaccurate.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of leaning toward maybe he didn't really do much of anything. I think, like I said, he probably did kidnap and beat up that one dude, but that's not good, but that's like a pretty far cry from decapitating 100 children and fucking their neck holes.
Another thing is that if they really believed this was true and somebody said, yeah, we buried him out in the moat or whatever, they would have gone out there to dig one of them up and say, see, he's telling the truth. Here's the kid's body.
That's what I mean. It's like if the servant said, "Oh, we threw them in the moat or we threw them in the cesspit," you'd think somebody would go and at least find some bone fragment.
But there was no attempt to go verify that because they knew it was
I
bullshit.
don't think they wanted to verify it.
No, they didn't want to verify it. They knew it was bullshit.
Yeah, because they said, "Oh, if we go out there and not find anything."
The guys in the church and shit that tortured people to fucking get confessions out of them knew that shit didn't work because they knew that they made those confessions up and just said tortured them until they signed it.
Yeah.
They didn't.
I kind of feel like
that's why they gave it Christian burial. They knew it was bullshit, but then everybody got their cut and they fucking
because by all accounts, I mean, Gilles de Rais, whatever he did or didn't do, he was apparently a very pious Catholic. So there was that.
I don't think I have more to say about it. Why don't you go ahead and shut it down, right? Done, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm
done, man. I'm done working.
He's done working.
Done working.
That's nice. I never get done working except when I'm sleeping. All right, so that'll do it for episode 144 about Gilles de Rais. Let us know what you think in the comments. Do you think he's guilty? Not guilty? I don't really know. Like I said, I don't think so. But you know, if you're like a medieval historian, let me know what you think about it. Because I just
you gotta have physical evidence.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That is, as far as I know, they didn't find anybody, so fuck that. All right, so that'll do it for this episode. And remember, if you like the show, like, share, subscribe on all your social media. If you would like to financially support the show, it would be much appreciated. You can go to our Patreon page, patreon.com/13o'clockpodcast, or you can go to our blog, 13o'clockpodcast.wordpress.com, and there's a little button to a PayPal account that will, if you want to give a one-time donation, that would be much appreciated also. And remember, our regular episodes come out every Tuesday, and we also have movie retrospectives, usually older movies, that comes out every Friday. And we also have matinee, which is 3 new movies in the theater, that comes out every Sunday. So check them all out if you haven't already, and we will see you next time. Bye.